I understand the gravity of my actions and the harm they have caused, and I take full responsibility for them.
McKenna Kindred teared up at her sentencing for having sex with a student while her husband was away. Now we're seeing some of the messages that she and the teen exchanged. I take a look at the case and where Kindred is now. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Staying on top of the news, it's absolutely crucial. But with media bias these days, who knows what to believe? So I want to introduce you to our sponsor, Straight Arrow News. Straight Arrow News is a personalized news platform that gives readers fact-based journalism to inform and build trust. Their Media Miss tool shows readers headlines not seen on mainstream outlets, providing useful commentary that cuts through sensational spin. Their site and app also points out biases with a media landscape to group sources by political leaning for full transparency. So if you're ready for a better way to get the news, go to san.com/crimefix or just click the link in my description. Straight Arrow News. Skip the drama, get the facts. Welcome back to trustworthy journalism. McKenna Kindred had a great life in 2022 and 2023, or so it seemed. She was a pretty young teacher at Spokane Valley High School in Washington State. She was married to a lawyer. The young couple, they had their entire lives ahead of them. But then the whispers started at school about Kindred and a student, and Kindred reported that she was being harassed by rumors about a student and her having a relationship. Police became involved, and Kindred ended up being charged with 2 felonies related to allegations that she was having sex with a male student who was 17. Kindred was 23 at the time, but that doesn't matter. She was still his teacher, and it was a crime. Now, one of the student's friends also apparently saw Instagram messages between Kindred and the student and reported them to a teacher. Now we're seeing some of the text messages between the student and the teacher that police found, and the Daily Mail has obtained them. They are disturbing. Kindred wrote to the teen, "I was sad when you had to leave my room. I wanted you to be in my room. When other girls talk about you in my class, I could feel myself getting mad." She then followed up about their illicit sexual encounter. "We almost got caught. I was sad when that student walked in when he did. I wanted you to hold me. I really like being touched by you." In another exchange, Kindred appeared to respond to the student about videos that he sent to her. Kindred wrote, "But I also managed just fine in the shower with what you sent to me yesterday and today." The student responded, "Mom, I'm glad I can satisfy you." And Kindred gave that message a thumbs up. The student then asked her if she used a sex toy in the shower, and she responded that she did. The student responded that she should have recorded a video of that act, and she said, next time, and that she needed to relearn Snapchat. Ha ha. The student responded, FR, meaning for real. Then later, "Are you up?" The Daily Mail reports that the student's mother actually found photos that McKenna Kindred had sent to her son of her breasts exposed. In April 2024, I told you that McKenna Kindred pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanors. Those charges were reduced from those 2 felony counts. She received no jail time and tearfully addressed the court.
I understand the gravity of my actions and the harm they have caused, and I take full responsibility for them. I know that this past year has been incredibly difficult for all involved. As a result of my actions, I've lost my career, valuable friendships, freedoms, and have let down countless people who have placed their trust in me.
Kindred's husband actually wrote a letter to the judge in support of his wife. He wrote, "As McKenna's husband, it has been a challenging year full of uncertainty. However, McKenna's remorse for her actions is the one thing that is certain. Where most would give up under the pressure and guilt, McKenna has channeled that remorse into facing her mistakes and actively seeking the help she needs and regularly working to rise above it all. This has become apparent to me through our continued professional counseling as we work through and address the underlying issues that contributed to this situation. We are both determined to emerge from this experience as stronger, more resilient spouses and members of society." Now, back in 2024, I spoke with former prosecutor Matt Murphy about this case.
Okay, when it comes to sex offenders, just broadly, child molesters, rapists, I can tell you from personal experience in dealing with these cases over and over again as a prosecutor, you know, sex offenders, especially sexual predators, do not get better. All the therapy in the world does not help them. And we saw this in the 1970s, where there's this idea that once they went to prison, if they quote unquote got the help that they needed, these guys were released. And what we learned is that they continue to do this. They might not get caught again. They will reoffend, 100%. Now, this situation may be a little bit different because of the circumstances. This woman, I can't imagine her marriage was exactly great. Whether she is an actual sexual predator or not, or whether this was, a one-off is open for debate. But this idea that sex offenders can do less than lifetime registration is, I think it's folly by a lot of these legislatures in the Western states. In California, I can't stand it. It's like the idea that a man could molest a child and then not have lifetime 290 registration is what it's called, is absolutely insane. It is madness. So hopefully she doesn't reoffend. Hopefully, regarding her situation, I think she was 23 when she met him. Maybe this is the only time she'll do it. I hope that's the case. But that 10-year sex offender registration thing is something that's being applied to men and much younger children.
Now, at the sentencing, McKenna Kindred's pastor, he also vouched for her, writing a letter. The pastor wrote, "As an ecclesiastical leader, I am writing to you on behalf of McKenna Kindred, who will come before you for her sentencing. I feel strongly it is important for you to be aware of her considerable progress and spiritual growth over the past year. I first became acquainted with McKenna about 3 years ago, when she and her husband moved into our geographic-based congregation. My first significant interaction was about 15 months ago, shortly after learning of the terrible situation. I vividly recall McKenna being understandably shaken and devastated as she grasped the enormity of the effect of her actions and choices. She expressed a desire to overcome this awful situation and, like many in Holy Scripture, one day be forgiven and emerge stronger and more resolute. We prayed together and sought heavenly guidance and strength at the start of a path to forgiveness and mercy. Being encouraged with her sincere desires and intentions, I continue to meet with McKenna regularly over the past 15 months. Gratefully, I have witnessed her seek and utilize many helpful resources, such as individual and marriage counseling, devoting significant time to prayer and daily scripture study, and consistent church attendance with her husband's loving grandparents. In each of our interactions, I have been profoundly inspired by her growth and progress in understanding factors that led to her poor choices, the responsibility and ownership she demonstrates, and the commitment to learn and develop into a much stronger person, striving to live a Christian life. She has found remarkable mental health professionals that, combined with renewed religious devotion, I feel has proved to be invaluable in her forward and upward momentum." McKenna Kindred and her husband now live in Idaho. She's on the sex offender registry there, where she is listed as compliant. I want to bring in Sherry Botwin. She is a therapist and also the author of a book entitled Thriving After Trauma. Sherry, thank you so much for coming back on. We've discussed these teachers before. We just discussed one last week. I covered this case back in 2024 when McKenna Kindred was sentenced. She was initially charged with felony counts. These were knocked down to 2 misdemeanors. She got no jail time. She was placed on probation. She's been discharged from that, probation, the supervision. She's now a registered sex offender for 10 years, probably about a little more than 8 years now. Your thoughts, first of all, on the sentence. Do you think it has anything to do with the student being 17 years old?
I hope not, but it could, because again, he was older at the time of the abuse. So, I don't know what the laws are in that state. It's possible, but I think it's also that she said she did it. She pled guilty. So it sounds to me like, the sentence partly was her way, or it was a compromise. She obviously did not get much of a sentence as she probably should have based on the allegations and the crimes that she says that she committed.
We're seeing the text messages now. The text messages are pretty raunchy. And we see in some of these cases, even when it's a teenage boy, and it kind of, I think, contributes to what you and I have discussed in the past about how, like, you know, it goes to that kind of misnomer that it's like, oh, you know, that boys enjoy this, or that they're not affected by it. That whole kind of like, where was she when I was in high school kind of thing that goes around. And this kid was going back and forth with her, you know, this 17-year-old boy, and he's asking her for videos and pictures, and he is communicating with her back and forth. So we see that. We see him appearing to consent, but under the law, he couldn't because he was her. The age of consent might be 16 in Washington, but she's still an authority figure. She is his teacher. Right. So you're in your eyes, does a kid like this, despite us seeing these text messages, will he still have some impact? Will he still be affected later in life by this? Or maybe is he still being affected right now?
I would say, I mean, I don't know him, but I would say to you, he will be so affected as he gets older. What we have to understand is he's 17, so he is a teenager. His brain is not fully developed. He doesn't really understand the enormity of what's happening and how inappropriate this type of connection is. But what I see, because I work with a lot of male adults who were abused at the same age, as they get older, even in their 20s, they realize, wait, this was so not okay. Why was this teacher engaging in this type of behavior? And then the thing that he struggles with, or this is what I see in my practice, clients will say to me, why did I like it? Or why did I let her do that? Or maybe it was my fault because I engaged too. So then there's all that shame and regret, things that obviously he or any teenager shouldn't be feeling. But I would say in these cases, the impact gets bigger and more problematic for many of these teenagers as they get older.
And that's what I'm wondering here. Despite the fact that he was 17, the age of consent is 16, there's got to be an embarrassment factor here. His friends were becoming aware of this. His friends apparently saw the messages, reported it to another teacher. That's how this kind of came about. Mom then sees, apparently his mother finds pictures of McKenna, you know, exposing herself to the son. I mean, there's got to be some shame that comes along with this, some shame and guilt, because once you mature and then you look back, you kind of think, God, like, why did I do that? Or why did I engage in that? And then some blame that he might place upon himself.
I mean, I can imagine if I were sitting in therapy with him, even now, a couple years later, as we read these text messages, the level, like you said, of embarrassment, of shame, I don't think he should have to feel that, but of course he's going to feel that. He's exposed in a way that as he gets older, he's going to wish he hadn't been. And he's also going to realize that the relationship, there was a imbalance of power. And as he gets older, he's going to see, she took advantage of my vulnerability. She used my being a teenager, going through puberty. She took advantage of that. So the work for him, or people like him, is to really put the responsibility back on the person who did the wrongdoing and understand that at 17, there probably was a part of him that thought, oh my God, this is great. My teacher thinks I'm attractive, or maybe he's attracted to her. So it's like, almost like he's gonna have to go through layers of working through understanding, because that embarrassment and that shame, that's what then turns into depression, anxiety, relationship issues. And, you know, it makes me really upset for people in this situation, because the public, people who haven't been through it, they don't understand what he may be going through. And I can imagine that people probably say some really mean things to him, especially now that we have all these online digital platforms. I can only imagine what he's going through right now as we find out more about the interactions between them.
What's really crazy to me And we don't know anything about the state of their marriage. You know, her husband, Kyle, they are still together, Kyle and McKenna. But, you know, they were a young couple at the time. They're a little older now, not much. But he wrote a letter in support of her and said they were going through counseling and trying to identify things that were going on with them that may have, like, allowed this to happen and things like that. He was very supportive of her. So obviously they've been in intensive therapy. But she is like writing to this kid in some of these text messages as if she's jealous. That's like the weirdest thing to me. It's so gross. But she is a teacher, an authority figure. And yes, she's in her early 20s when this is all going on. But she's writing to him like, I'm so jealous when these other girls talk about you. It's so upsetting to me and all this stuff. It's just such an ick factor. I mean, it's like, do we have to like maybe not have young women who are like in their early 20s acting as teachers for high school students? I mean, I know that sounds extreme, but what are your thoughts on that?
So I have a couple thoughts in terms of her piece and the part of her that expresses jealousy. This is a woman who's abusing boys, right? So what I see with perpetrators is they want to have control, they want to have power over their victims. So it is very common in those type of cases for the perpetrators to then express anger or jealousy. That's why a lot of sexual abuse survivors, when they're teenagers, don't date or don't have other relationships, because they're made to feel like you are indebted to me, I own you, and you can only be with me. In terms of the husband, I mean, I have a couple thoughts. They're still together, right? But this is a woman who's clearly in a position where she can be very manipulative, coercive. We don't know the dynamics of their relationship. We don't know if they're still together because maybe she says to him some of the same things that she says to this teenage boy. We don't know if the husband we don't know if maybe part of him thinks, well, what's the big deal? They were only like, 7 years in age difference and he engaged. Like, there's just so much we don't know about them. But one of the first things I would want to find out from the husband is, what is your relationship like with this woman? And are you allowed to have your own voice? Are you allowed to have your own opinion? Because those are things that will affect how people portray themselves and their intimate partners, even in places like courts of law when they're trying to get someone they love out of any type of trouble.
They've now moved. They're no longer in Washington. I'm assuming it's like, hey, let's get a fresh start in Idaho. I have no idea why they moved, but that's kind of where my mind is going. She's a registered sex offender in the state of Idaho. She has to register for 10 years. As I mentioned earlier, it's a little more than 8 now that she will have to register. You know, who's to say she doesn't get into a position of authority another time once her supervision is up? I mean, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, she's supposed to be undergoing continued counseling, therapy, things of that nature. But what do you think of that? You know, she's in another state now. Could a fresh start really help her? Does intensive therapy help her? Because I don't think that this kind of thing just poof goes away.
No, it never just goes away. And I would say there are people, I have worked with offenders who want to get better, want to rehabilitate themselves, but in the course of 30 years, I've only worked with a handful of people who are in that position. What concerns me about the registry and the fact that it's only 10 years is how do they decide in 10 years, okay, we can take her off that list? Are they monitoring her? Is she going through psychological testing to find out if these perpetrator-like behaviors are still embedded in her consciousness? So there are things about the registry. Yeah, if you do a background check and she tries to get a teaching job in Idaho, it's going to show up. But when she gets taken off that list, she's going to be 34? So how do we know that in 8 years, even if she went to therapy twice a day, how do we know that she's not going to commit the same crimes? This is where I feel like as a country, we're working harder, I think, to try to put a stop to these types of crimes, at least try to prevent or have them be less. But are we actually doing enough to really make sure that when someone's on the list, that they're being monitored, that they're in the right type of therapy, and that we are looking to see, is this person actually improving through therapy, or is this person still thinking in the same way? So we still have a lot of work to do, and she could move wherever she wants, but if she's a perpetrator, if she's a pedophile, or she believes on some level that it is okay for her to do what she did to this young boy, she will do it again.
And that's my worry and my concern, because the judge the judge signed off on this. The judge sentenced her. She got a plea deal. So the defense and the prosecution came together. They agreed to this. Maybe the prosecution thought, we're never going to get a jury to throw her in prison. They're going to see this kid and be like, yeah, she really it's just not going to work out. But the judge signed off on this and sentenced her to what he sentenced her to. It was 2 misdemeanor counts from 2 felonies and 10 years on the registry. So this is a function of what the judge decided. This isn't, or I guess maybe what the plea agreement was. So what do you do there?
So here's the thing, when it comes to judges and the court system, why aren't we going into these court systems and really, really educating judges about the pathology behind a predator? There are judges that I have met in my work that seem to really get it. They have the education, the understanding about what this type of behavior is. There are other judges that I have sat in front of, that I've done testimony in front of, where I have seen that judge victim shame, minimize, diminish the level of the crime. So I don't know this judge, but does this judge understand that by signing off on that type of a plea deal, or really such a minimal consequence to what could be a life-changing crime for this teenager at the time? That would be one of the things that I would want to talk to the judge about, if we had that opportunity to really go in there and ask these judges, so what made you in this case decide that this was an appropriate consequence? I would really like to know that.
Yeah, I wonder too if a man would have received a harsher sentence, but I don't know. We just don't know. Sherry Botwin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, McKenna Kindred is being required to register as a sex offender until 2034. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. Remember, you can always watch us on YouTube, and you can also watch us on Spotify. I'll see you back here next time.